Alright, if you watch this intelligently before you post it, don't post this one. Just look at it, think about it, deal with it. Ultimately, you did come up with a bunch of silly bullshit, and you did say you wanted people to spread shit like undercover, as though you were the sensei of the Ninja Turtles. So let's relevate on that in relation to the circumstances we find ourselves in currently. Alright, so how can we adapt an analogy through the variables of the Ninja Turtles, the most epically brilliant cartoon ever made, especially back in the 80s, which is the only one I can really speak of because that's the only one I watched. Anyways, right, so it first came out, and again, even though you guys don't get it, the Chinese are based off the lunar calendar. They waited 3 days after the dark moon to do this. That was not in my repertoire of knowledge, by the way. If you're starting to think I'm in on something, and because of the last recording of when I was trying to figure out how they feel about the tit and tat of the trade war, I might sound schizophrenic, and I might be good at connecting dots. That doesn't implicate me as irrational for doing so, and or part of any conspiracies validating any deliberate action today, and thus then therefore ever. So you might want to think about that before I get into lunar symbology. But it's relevant in this Ninja Turtle situation, so please don't kill me for it. So 84, the year of the rat, year I was born. The sensei, symbology to the lunar year of the turtles, symbiotically and always have been the beater of the hair because of their slow, constant movement. If the tortoise and the hare were human beings, and one could let's run out of energy before the other. Similar to how, sometimes you do or don't accept Eastern philosophy, which seems ideologically paradoxical, but, it's similar to the flow. The softest things penetrate the hardest things. Now, from a physical, scientific standpoint, that's erroneously and epically, clearly not physically true. But ultimately, what we're about to do analytically is intellectual in variables of thought, not well. Let's not go back to my whole which came first, the thought or the matter. Anyways, um, so in defense of what is perceived as sort of prejudiced and my King of the Hill analogies, I feel as though I have to defend my ultimate principle, construct, and variable into which I come from persistently as a Christian. And it's not because I have to, it's because I need to grasp it for how not to defend it in the flow of debates unto which are erroneously unnecessary when thinking beneficial, not argumentative, in an overall verbatim, which people feel prejudicially identified through and in. But overlooking the I am part of the evangelicals. I was taught evangelicalism, which is sort of a poor man's version of the Catholic Church. There is no division to it. And to ideologically construct yourself as a Bible translator, uh, unsegregated from any given worshiper of Christ as your Savior, similar to the origination of the very political agenda and governmental construct, which was never meant to be, and was first developed in a revolution to dismantle in the northern regions of Israel, based upon certain variables of the way of life being essentially and philosophically certain, as opposed to argumentative and cooperative action. Um, Hence why Jesus was made fun of for not being as scholarly as them and not capable of producing variables unto which negated but undid. It's sort of like NF trying to get into a battle with a guy who's like, well, your woman sucked my dick. It's like, NF's going to come back at that in a manner into which is not like, well, your woman sucked my dick. And Christians don't battle. Christian thought, philosophy, lyrics don't battle. They contend the hard-headed in a non conflict. Ultimately, that's why the lyrics of Christian are segregated from ultimately all artists, because it's presented as a therapy for one to not get cooperative. Even though I'm not saying that art doesn't touch on the various things in Christianity into which it does, it just doesn't over implore certain syntaxes which are remnant of a dominant marketing structure through the Bible and through uh, uh, elusive words which relevate on very specifically love, being the principal orient in monotheism, as to how to exchange and communicate no matter what your symbiology, language, or heritage or perspective is ultimately engaging perspectually and contextually. But back to the analogy. So, 84, the year of the rat. Now, the sensei of the Ninja Turtles presided specifically over the purple, which, as most theologians grasp, is the Jewish Hebrew heritage, symbiologically presented through the origination of the lion. Then we have the orange, Michelangelo, the painter of ultimately the. I'm actually out. Sorry, brother. The painter of the 16th Chapel, very well and notable Catholic artist and Catholic producer of art for one of the most phenomenal pieces of art ever created. Symbiologically, mostly kind of the old-fashioned cross, more symmetric, not the crucifix symbol. Then you have Raphael, which is actually more geared towards variables of philosophical, scientific, orient-based way of life thinking, and thus produces sort of a tougher, rougher personality adapted through the Ninja Turtles. And then we have Leonardo the leader, representing principally creative Renaissance-like diversity in the theological basis for why and how Rome had to sort of fall from a political standpoint and encourage itself from a creative one to create a diverse variable into which Christian thought and thus Jesus could kind of, instead of conflict with the world, rationalize its own diverse, intergenious perspective. Naturally, going the Protestant methodology of theological diversity in how that was once a countercultural perspective in the revolution of going from Judea up to the uh, diverse scholars of how the variables of which the Jews protect was questioned very heavily to a point which eventually led to the domination of the Hebrew revolutionary Jesus Christ. Some say it was partly Arab, Egyptian, black, whatever, it doesn't matter. Well, it does to some, but it's, I don't know, if Abraham could come back, he'd be like, hey guys, you both have potential, no matter who your mother was. Just treat each other right, please. But anyways, let's not go into that. I don't want to piss anyone off. Let's see here. So yeah, breaking down symbiology of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. For inspiration for this recording, I just listened to Teenage Wasteland. Very inspiring song from, I believe, the 80s. No pun intended, but it's actually good repertoire, creative thought. Anyways, where are we going with this? Oh yeah, so now that we have this interspectual pronunciation of where and how, at one point, the variables into which whether or not Jesus would be accepted in sort of more of a Gentile manner by the Hebrew scholars, and or not, variabilized by the court systems, which are segregated by inside or outside the circle. Sort of, kind of. We have a relevance in how and why Protestant diversity prevails with a diverse sort of crash override in the non-division sector, mostly implored by evangelicals, and sort of implicates the basis of Christian Zionism, even though I personally think it seems as though it's really the Southern Baptists actually producing these strong heretical beliefs in the preservation of Israel and the lower form of our position as Christians to the various chosen ones. Again, I'm not trying to get that serious about this stuff. I'm technically, I at my subconscious core, I think like Raphael. On my conscious reality, I joke like Michelangelo. Inadvertently, I introvert like Donatello. And I try not to let everyone know I'm a blue because I don't really feel like being the leader. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, I'm Protestant Christian, obviously. Where's this going? Oh, so to inadvertently rationalize why playing King of the Hill is a pain in the ass, and why I play, and like the other Protestants play, King of the Ditch. Not trying to be a dick, I'm really not. I'm just pointing out it's better to go under than over. Okay, I am sort of getting, that was too convoluted an analogy. But ultimately, when you're playing King of the Hill, you put yourself into a status into which the majority forms, or the dominance forms, through interaction of aggression. When you play King of the Ditch, you play dominant majorities through the allowance of held positions nearby to the center of thus then therefore the pinnacle point. Ultimately, it's sort of like, those little half circles Spock plays in to learn on his planet, which got destroyed in that movie. But if ultimately you're not, I know I'm all over the place because I'm really just trying to get you to get my point. Even though Spock is clearly a Hebrew culture, I think the actor's actually Jewish and points out to everyone that the famous Spock hand signal is a blessing from Hebrew times. Again, it's all we're Judaic Christian. So ultimately, what we're trying to go with this is how to rationalize the imposition. In my opinion, Christian Zionists might be over diluting to in this king of the hill variable, unto which vindicates and validates a quarter of the country which believes in a situation which is untouchable, based on the previous designators of how to rationalize theological communications and or literal syntax, political structures of organization, and economic inaccuracies to where and how these prevail based upon a literal structure of monetary wealth and thus value creation towards the overall trade system. Anyways, so back to the Sensei, the 84, the positioning of the cartoon for first to be even capably remembered by my generation, the millennials, and 84 designating the beginning of that. It's not just serendipitous that ultimately it came at the beginning of a lunar symbolism sent unto which a 5-year-old would be first introduced to it, integrating a symbolism which you might not be familiar with. The Hebrews also go on lunar calendars similar to the Chinese, so they probably a little bit more parallel on that necessity. Anyways, the Sensei prevailing and presiding over all of these for color-coded principal intelligences, which were or weren't labeled based on history, prevail in rationalizing certain ideological simplicities of how to slowly progress and think as readily and as ethically as a ninja from a personality disposition which is unique and disciplined in its own respect. Ultimately, what the Ninja Turtles have done for my generation, or my year of birth, unlike George Orwell creeping everybody out thinking that my birth year's the beginning of the end, this is not what I assume his intention was, by the way. But ultimately, this sort of symbiology, I believe, is very, very unique and beneficial. How does one utilize intelligent design? Well, it creates symbolism, contextual specialization, and unique integration of variables through generations, through diverse theologies, philosophies, and all those developments unto now without, one erasing the other because they want to be like, well, no, I'm king of the hill. Well, it's no, Protestants are doing relatively well in the modern, newest geographic space due to the diversity, the crash override of simplicity, and the overall construct of a monotheism, which is principal to how and why uh, cooperation is not a choice, it's a necessity unto which is dominant and will eventually prevail to a majority overall throughout time. Um, in my opinion and in my belief, the separation of religion and state is thus and then therefore how and why Martin Luther King had to revolt against the Catholic Church because it was integrating too many theological stories into how one rationalized liberal conservative practices in a ever more complicated and evolving world. So, what does this all mean? What this means is you don't really need to get souped up in ancient architecture unto which was as much as necessitatively and rationally, contextually, you need to believe in that into which is rational to your given community here now. What does this have to do with the war on terror? I'll tell you. In my opinion and in my belief, Christianity has presented itself a paradox into which it is overlooked how and why religion is best taste without the indoctrination of organized principles unto that which spiritually ingratiates one's um, overall unilateral cooperation. Spirituality is, to me, um, how one nurtures his dream state in thought and in action and in word through an everyday choice and decision made in the woken world. Now, when I go to bed, I have dreams, good or bad, based upon how well I've synergized my overall presence to discipline in my choices of necessity and diverse propensity to work together ultimately without destruction. If I am questioning something which could cause a great deal of chaos, I get a dream proving to me why I'm being an ignorant asshole. If I do good, I get a dream which takes me further down the progressively intellectual state of thinking unto where I am less confused once woken to a new reality unto which I did not understand the day before. Thus, like a ninja turtle, so again, say spread my thought, I'm actually composing myself as that into which is in trying to rationalize for people how critical your dream state messaging actually is. In my opinion, in my belief, but it really is. Freud will tell you from a standpoint of looking at a rat, these are all just fear based simulations of how to get out of life threatening circumstances. And at your youngest age, sometimes it is. I had a repetitive dream of being on a stage and a blue and orange snake at one time, or a green and purple snake, very large, would come up and scare everyone off from my big performance. And I don't know why I had this repetitive dream. Anyways, as a child, but they're to indoctrinate a certain symbiotic construct to the world into which exists, um, sent to us by a sort of cloud of minds which exists, have learned, and prevail in retaining memories and communications which get passed down, in my opinion, in our sleep state, REM sleep, interconnectively to predisposition a intelligent design of thought and action, similar to how artists do in the woken world. Um, Thus and then, therefore, think without destruction at principal interest when feeling blocked or conflicted through any theological, philosophical, scientific fact discovery or challenge. And the more you prevail in coinciding a forward and progressive state of being, which ultimately, over slow increments of time, produce evolution, cooperation, action, solutions, um, you will have better and better consistently dreams, which are fun. It's like, it's not like watching a movie, it's like being in a movie or a video game, a simulation, a reality under which, unlike anything you've seen before, it's like Harry Potter stepping into, the wizard world. It's wonderful. It becomes the greatest entertainment and the one of the most enriching parts of your life, aside from your jollies with your wife and your everyday hand holding and love for her, and from a male's perspective, ultimately just the time you spend indulging in the real world, sharing it with your soulmate. Um, but yeah, that's how to get those kinds of dreams, those kinds of intellectual advancements, those kinds of discoveries, those types of simulations, those types of benefits, those types of jollies in just dream state. And the better we can really truly grasp and believe how critical our delivery of these dreams is remnant in our everyday actions and everyday world, by not invoking a interest to dominate unless absolutely necessary for security purposes, um, an enriched environment and psychology into which is nurtured by the dream state from an emotional standpoint, and not just a rudimentary scientific circumstance that gets the fat out of your brain, which, on a biological level is the principal encouragement and enrichment of good sleep. I think some bile or some sort of whatever it's called builds up in your brain over the day's work, and in your sleep, it somehow dissolves it, leaving your electrical synapses more capable, more functional, better preserved for the next day and next woken state, as well as the time for your body to grow its muscles and develop and be better and do better. But, anyways, so why I used the lunar technology, the Ninja Turtles, my favorite cartoon, and everything to get people to grasp where, how, and why their thought is so critical, their actions are so critical, their words are so critical to indulging uh, your little movie directors and whatnot in your head to give you brilliant and interesting and unique and fun and enriching dreams. Literally. Aside from the ones you literally produce for practical purposes in the variables of your real life. Um, yeah, I did. So it worked. For me, at least. I'm no I'm never going to be invited to TED Talks or anything like that. I'm not anywhere on those guys' levels. But, this is my best shot at pointing out what I mean when I say, enrich your computer processor for the dreams to come are never ending as long as you're still alive.